There we go. It's 10 a.m., so I guess we can start. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hopefully everybody had a coffee and a bagel or two. I haven't the opportunity yet. But I have my water, so I'm okay. My name is Marius. Today I'm going to talk about delivering remote app from Azure. Anybody tried remote app in Azure yet? Raise your hands. Okay, so maybe 5 or 10 people. Hopefully someone will learn something today. So before I go on with the agenda, I'm going to talk briefly about myself. Not so much to say. I work as a senior solution advisor at Comax in Norway. Comax is a distributor for Microsoft, Citrix, and Dell, among and others, where I primarily focus on Microsoft as a whole. So I do Azure, I do Intune, I do System Center, and Office 365, etc., and so on. I also do a little bit of training on Microsoft, Citrix networking, and Veeam backup and replication. I'm also a Microsoft MVP on Config Manager. So why the hell am I talking about remote app? Okay, I'll get back to that. I'm also on social media, so if anyone has any questions during the session, just raise your hand or throw something at me, or you can reach out to me on Twitter, email, or my blog afterwards. And some asked the question about presentations being available after the session, and they will be available after the conference is over. So, enough about me. Today's agenda. What is Azure Remote App? First things first. Then I'm going to talk a little about the differences between Azure Remote App and the traditional RDS deployment. And then I'm going to talk about the different deployment modes that we have in Azure Remote App, how to create custom images, create a custom image with our business line of business applications, upload them to Azure and make them available for our users. Best practices, and of course I needed to have a slide on pricing, SLA, and a couple of things to note that's very important to be aware of. So, what is Azure Remote App? In 2008, when Microsoft released Windows Server 2008 R2, I believe, Microsoft made available something called Remote App in RDS. So instead of having the full desktop experience, users were able to just start their applications, because Microsoft believed that it's not the desktop that's important, it's the application that users need access to. So this has been available for a couple of years now, and then Microsoft incorporated the idea to actually implement this type of feature in Azure. So that's why Azure Remote App was born. So in the simplest way, it's RDS applications as a service. So you can go in from a user point of view, click on an application, and it will start an RDP session towards a terminal server in Azure. So Microsoft is responsible for the entire stack. So you don't have to worry about doing patch or maintenance or draining a session host before you have to do WSS updates or something like that. You don't have to worry about the hardware or networks or storage. Microsoft does everything for you. And everything is provided from the reliable Azure platform. Of course, they had a downage for a couple of months back. So no setup or licenses required. You don't have to buy a Windows Server CAL, and you don't have to purchase an RDS CAL. You have a pay per user per month. Simple as that. It's accessible from almost any device which supports RDP clients. So the last 6 months or so, Microsoft has done a tremendous job implementing clients which support RDS Remote App. So for instance, you have clients on Google, or Android, iOS, Mac, Windows itself, of course, Windows Phone. And all of them support Azure Remote App, because underneath it still uses the RDP, same protocol. It just has a little layer above, which I'm going to talk about a little later. Also, scales depending on usage. So if let's start with 2 users who access some sort of application, and you go up to 20 users, Azure will automatically scale up accordingly with virtual machines underneath. And also, it will scale down if there are also only 2 users using it again. So it scales up and down. It was released in December 11th, public general availability. It's also a 30-day free trial for those who haven't tried it yet. Important to remember that you have to delete the deployment after you're done with the trial. So, how does it look like from a user perspective? They have the clients either accessing from Mac, Android, or Windows. They access their published apps from Azure Remote App. And every user gets a user profile disk attached to their profile, which is 50 gigabytes large. So why is that? That is because every virtual machine that is generated by Azure Remote App are stateless, meaning that Microsoft might delete them and generate new ones if they need to do maintenance. So Microsoft does not guarantee that data that is stored locally, either on the C or D drive of the virtual machines, are going to be deleted at some point. So that's why it's important to store data on the profile disks, which is basically a VHD file that's attached to the session host when a user logs in. And also what's not shown here is that all these services are protected by Azure Load Balancer, which redirects users based on what kind of data center they're going to access and make sure it's highly available. And all the terminal servers have a guest extension installed. So they communicate directly with the Azure Fabric Controller, which is basically the brain and logic in Azure. So when they see that they have too much or too low resources or too many users logged in, they say to the Fabric Controller that we have so many users, we need more resources. And then Azure will automatically start to provision new virtual machines based on a template that we have, an image template. And users authenticate with either their Microsoft account or Azure Active Directory account, or they can use their integrated Active Directory user credentials after we've set up a hybrid identity connection. So for instance, if we have a customer that already uses Office 365 and they have a synchronization between their on-premise Active Directory and Azure Active Directory, they can also provision RemoteApp and use the same credentials if they want to. So, what else is included? Azure Remote App runs on top of Windows Server 2012 R2. So that means if we want to create a template image that we want to use with our own applications, we need to have Windows Server 2012 R2 installed. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. It uses RDP 8.1 protocol. So always remember to use the latest RDP client. If you don't have access to the latest client, for instance, if you only have the available to use RDP 0.7, it's going to generate a lot more bandwidth for using RemoteApp. There's also a possibility to create, Microsoft has created some custom images which we can provision, and one of them is including Office 2013 Pro Plus. So that means we can provision a RemoteApp session with all the Office applications that users can access. Yeah, and I mentioned the device platforms and the account support, and it also has support for multi-factor authentication if you want to. So meaning that we have to authenticate with a username and password and a software token or something like that, or one-time key. And as I mentioned, there's a 50 gigabyte profile disk, but that is per deployment. I'm going to come back to a little bit later what the differences are. And how many use a USB drive when they're using an RDP session? USB drive attached to a local endpoint and the RDP, and then I try to download or upload something that's contained in USB disk. That's not enabled by default in Azure Remote App. I don't know why, but and you don't see the email link contained because I choose the wrong color, but in order to activate it, you have to send an email to remoteappforum@microsoft.com, and they will enable it for you on a subscription per basis. But they also said that it's coming as an option in the management portal. So when we go into Azure portal and provision a remote app, we can click and activate remote drives. But I'm guessing that it enabled by default for security reasons. So other features, upcoming features, I would say. Now, they haven't mentioned anything about this in the roadmap or anywhere else, but I've read a lot of articles on Remote App, and when I scroll down, I get to the commentary fields, and some users complain that, oh, I want this, I want that, and some Microsoft employees say that, okay, it's coming soon. So I took a lot of those memos that I found. I took note of them. One of the interesting things is that who here has provisioned a virtual machine in Azure? There we go. One of the main problems is Remote App and the traditional IaaS platform in Azure are separated. So you can't directly integrate Remote App virtual machines to an existing Azure virtual machine. They are separated, as you say, in different clouds in Azure or containers or whatever. So the only way to integrate those directly is by setting up site-to-site VPN between the two containers or clouds. And also, when I want to create a custom image, let's say I want to create a custom image with my own applications, and I want to use them in Azure, I have to do it locally and use a PowerShell command and then upload them. It would be a lot easier if you could just create a virtual machine in Azure, install it there, and then just make Azure take the virtual machine and create a template of it. And that's also a feature that's coming soon. And when Microsoft created Remote App, they said that all the users care about is the applications, right? They always do that, but they also get confused. They start an application, they think it's running locally, but it's not. It's running from somewhere. So therefore, there's a lot of complaints that, hey, my users need full desktop access as well. So that's also in the planning stages. And also the ability to integrate apps locally with using file extensions, for instance. If I have a .PowerPoint file, for instance, I double-click on it, and it automatically starts a remote app session. But that's coming as well. And also, the link down below, Microsoft has created, when they create a new version of Internet Explorer, they're going to release it on their website. And for those who have Remote App, can try the latest version of Internet Explorer for free by signing up on a web page. So when I release the new web browser, which is codename Spartan, it's going to be released there, and you can try it from a Remote App session. So let's take a look at the differences between traditional RDS and Remote App. So who here has set up a traditional RDS server or a terminal server? Yeah, that's mostly everybody. So Remote App, as I mentioned, includes all the licenses, pay per user. Microsoft is responsible for everything. The machines are stateless, meaning that they might disappear and Microsoft might provision new virtual machines, depending if they need to patch it or do maintenance. And the users can authenticate either using Azure Active Directory, Microsoft accounts, or a hybrid account. Scales automatically, and 50 gigabytes profile disk per user per deployment. So traditional RDS, we need all the licenses ourselves. We need to install the product key to actually activate user or device cal in RDS. We maintain and control the entire stack, mostly. The machines are static, And we can also decide how do we want the user profiles to be stored. Roaming, folder redirection, Citrix profile management, local profiles. It doesn't scale automatically. Of course, we have a lot of users complaining, oh, it goes so slow. Okay, we have to provision new virtual machines. But we have the possibility to use GPU-based workloads inside our terminal servers. And we can use UDP with TCP on traditional RDS. So in 2012, I believe, Microsoft released RDS Gateway, which is the secure access server role for Windows Server, which had the possibility to use TCP 443 with UDP. So with UDP, Microsoft is doing all of its graphics rendering and using UDP to move it out to the endpoint client. But RemoteApp from Azure only uses TCP. So don't try to use any, let's say, GPU-related workloads running on Azure RemoteApp, because you'll get a terrible user experience. I'm guessing they're working on that as well. So deployment types. Well, basically, there's two of them. Cloud-based and hybrid-based. Cloud-based deployment, which is basically the one I've been talking about all this time, means that everything is running in Azure. User accounts are in Azure. I can use hybrid accounts if I want to. It's optional. All virtual machines are installed with System Center Endpoint Protection, which means that Microsoft has some sort of antivirus control on them. Operating system and applications are always up to date. Not all applications, but for instance, Office, which is maintained by Microsoft and patched by Microsoft. The operating system is patched by Microsoft. But I can create a custom image using my applications, upload it to Azure, and Microsoft will use that template as a golden image and provision virtual machines of it. So let's take a glimpse at how it looks like. Just have to switch the output here. If it works as I want it to. There we go. Okay, can everyone see okay on the screen? Doesn't scale as good as I wanted to, but we can give it a try. I'm doing a little bit of risk here because of Windows. I'm running Windows 10 Tech Preview. I'm also running the latest Tech Preview from Office, so I'm doing a little bit of risky research here, but hopefully it's work okay. Right, let's take a quick. Now, for those who are working in Azure from a day-to-day basis, they know there's two portals, management portals. You have the one in preview and you have the old version. RemoteApp is only available from the old version. So you can go into the new portal and try to search RemoteApp, but you won't find anything. So I have my list here of all of the different features available in Azure. I have a Home button here for RemoteApp. Now, if I want to create a new cloud-based deployment, either using an image from Microsoft or my own, I click New, App Services, click on RemoteApp. Now I have two options here, Quick Create or Create the VPN. With VPN, it's basically a hybrid version of it. So you give it a good name. Very important to have a descriptive one. Choose a region, which basically means what data center do you want this RemoteApp to be created. It's always important to choose the closest one, in case, or else the latency might give the users a very bad experience. I'm going to show a little bit afterwards. And you have two plans, basic and standard. So what's the difference? When I looked at Microsoft's website, I saw that basic is for information users and standard is for power users. Okay, what does that mean? So I had to do a little bit of research on my own. So what I found out is basic and standard, almost the same. It's virtual machines running with 7 gigs of memory. The difference is the CPU underneath. Basic is running AMD, and standard is using one of the latest Intel CPUs. And of course, there's also a price difference. Basic is cheaper, standard is a little more expensive. Not so much. And I choose my template image. I can choose my own image, or I can choose some of those that Microsoft has created. But this is going to take forever, so I already created one for us, which is called test 2. And I already accessed it a couple of times. So what I can see from the dashboard is which users have accessed the remote app session in February. Status, where it's located, template image. So what I'm actually seeing here is a deployment. This is a deployment. So that means that all the users accessing this deployment is having one user profile disk. So if I create a new deployment and attach the same users to that second deployment, they're going to get new profile disks. But that's just going to confuse the users even more. Where the hell's my data? So in user access here, I can define which users is going to have access to this deployment. So I can just enter, if I think I have, I can use mine. So if I try to type something that doesn't have Microsoft account or something, it's going to give me an error message. Hopefully somebody doesn't own this address. Yeah, there we go. So couldn't resolve user. So there's no way you can give a wrong user to access here. And under publishing, I can decide which applications I want to be published to the end users. And I can either publish using path on the template image or using start menu programs. It's basically going to show every application that is available. I want PowerShell, OneDrive, and Paint. Successfully started. Now, if I go to sessions here, there's no users logged in, but in here I can show which users logged in. I can force log them off. I can send them a message. I can disconnect them. I can't do shadow, so I can't actually help the user if I want to. It's coming, but not yet. And scale. Service plans, I can go from basic to standard if I want to. That means that Microsoft will start provisioning virtual machines from the template again on standard image, and they're going to delete the older ones eventually. Now, you also have a URL here, Remote Desktop Client. So from a Windows computer, you need to download this client. On a regular Android or phone or tablet, you just have to use the regular RDP client because it has support for a remote app. So I already have it installed somewhere. There we go. Just going to sign out. So what the client actually does, it's provide authentication layer above the traditional RDP client. So I can log in here with my Microsoft account because I just gave access to this user. There we go. Hopefully I typed the right address, right password as well. There we go. So what I can see here is that this user has access to 3 different deployments. First off is the one deployment that I just created and gained access to. So this means I have one user profile disk here, I have one user profile disk here, and of course the tech preview I mentioned about Internet Explorer being available. So I can just start an application from here using PowerPoint, so why not? So you can now see it's starting an RDP session. So there's virtual machines running in the back. And the Azure Load Balancer is doing its job by redirecting my user to somewhere in the world, starting RDP. Blah, blah, blah. There we go. So how we can see this is running on a remote app session. If you look at the icon on my task menu, you see there's a little red or a little circle there, which shows it's running a RDP session. So this is basically running from island. Seems to be working as it should. So as users want to save their data somewhere. So on this virtual machine, I can see it's having a C drive and a D drive, temporary storage and traditional C drive. I don't want to store my data there, but if I go into C Windows and Users, I see that I have my own profile, which is 50 gigabytes, even though I haven't stored it yet, because it's basically a VHD file, which is attached when I log in. So I can go there, and I can save my data, sign out, and I can open Office from the same deployment. Documents. All files. There we go. So it's the same disk. Files are stored. And all data, as in traditional Azure way, is replicated 3 times inside the same data center. Also important to remember that replication isn't the same as backup. If you manage to screw up your files, they're going to be screwed up 3 times on the same data center. And now, if I go back to the deployment, I go into Sessions. I should see my session there. There we go. So, basic help desk tools. Log off, disconnect, and send message. And one of the weird things I didn't find out about eventually is because I had a remote app session, and suddenly, after I was disconnected for a while, my session got lost and I couldn't reconnect. But it was because Microsoft was doing maintenance on the virtual machines. So how did I figure that one out? If we go into the management services, see here, subscription, and operations log. There's an own operation log for remote app. If I manage to find it, there we go. So here I can see everything that the administrator has done or help desk has done, and also what Microsoft Azure itself has done to our remote app sessions, either if they have done a maintenance or upgraded or something. It's going to show here. So if you screwed up, there's no way to delete the logs. I tried. So let's fix the screen again. Oh, that's a family photo from last year. I'm just showing that. There we go. So, hybrid deployment. What does that mean in Microsoft world? You have a connection in some sorts. So, in order to set up a hybrid connection between your on-premise and Azure Remote App, you have to use a site-to-site VPN, which basically means you have an encrypted virtual network between Azure and your own data center or infrastructure. So why do you want that? Let's say you have databases running locally, and you want to provision a lot of terminal servers in Azure for endpoint or end users to use in a specific amount of time, for instance. Last day of the month, they need to access their application to do a diagnostics or statistics job. It's a good way to use Azure Remote App. It also allows users to authenticate using their regular Active Directory credentials, if they have hybrid identity set up as well. Now, in a regular cloud-based deployment, Microsoft is responsible for the entire stack. In a hybrid deployment, it means that we can control them in some ways. We can use group policy, we can use PowerShell, we can use WSUS to do patching. So we have some sort of control ourselves. And it also allows us to use image-based updates. So I have a version 1 image containing Office something, and I want to do updates on that image. So I have to do an update locally on the image, and then I upload the image, and I overwrite the old one. So what Microsoft basically does is it's going to wait till every user is logged off the remote app session, and then they're going to replace the image and start provisioning new virtual machines. So let's head on over to the portal again. It's going crazy. So let's create a hybrid connection. Go into Remote App, create a VPN, give it a good descriptive name, choose a plan, basic standard, create a Remote App collection. So this only takes like 10 seconds. Why? Because we need to set up a VPN connection as well. So if we go into the hybrid deployment, click on the dashboard. So what I first need to do is set up a VPN connection. So I choose link Remote App virtual network. I can either choose create a new virtual network, or I can choose link an existing. So I already did the create the virtual network because it's basically just entering the local subnet and the virtual subnet and specifying the IP addresses for the VPN gateway. So choose virtual network. Then I get a script which I need to run on my local VPN device. Either it's Cisco, Juniper, or Windows remote server, remote and routing server. Now, even though it's just Cisco and Juniper Microsoft that's listed, it's a traditional IPsec VPN, so you can use it on any type of VPN device. It's just that Microsoft has created a custom script that you can just run, and it basically does everything for you. So get the script. I also need to specify domain credentials because in order to set up a hybrid connection, I need to integrate these machine accounts with our existing Active Directory. So I need to specify English keyboard. Need to remember the LDAP query. Also important to remember, always create a dedicated service account. Always important. Which is only used for VPN. Choose link remote app template. And here you can see I can only choose my own images. I can't choose some from Microsoft's. Choose a region. Voila. So it starts linking the template image. So give it a couple of minutes or so. It will start provisioning because it has the domain credentials. It has a template image that's going to build upon it. And it's going to provision, set up a VPN connection, and voila. We can start using them against. Now, what I can also mention is, if I want to upload a template image, I can do so here. I'm going to show the basic step-by-step how to do it, but after I've installed the virtual machine, running Windows Server, I have my application installed, I'm stuck with a VHD file, which I want to upload. I can choose Upload here. Call it something descriptive again. Choose location. And this requires that I have the Windows Azure PowerShell commandlets installed. Because I'm going to use that to enumerate the storage and link it up towards my existing account. And we play the waiting game for a couple of minutes. So what it does now, it downloaded a PowerShell script which basically points my VHD file to the right location. And I have a command which I need to run here, which basically points to the PowerShell script. And here I have the URL or the path to my storage blob in Azure. That's where I store VHD files in Azure. I just run this from PowerShell. From where the script is. CD downloads. There we go. Of course, I have to verify that I trust this script. Of course I do. It's Microsoft, of course. Doesn't everybody do that? So now I get the option to choose my VHD file, which I'm finished installing. Go to desktop. There I have my VHD file. So it now starts mounting. It does a hash checksum on it, and then it starts uploading. So what if the connection breaks? I had an image that was 60 gigabytes large, and I tried uploading it, and the connection broke when I was at about 50 gigabytes. And I thought, crap, I have to do it again. Now, it starts resuming. You just run the script again. It says, okay, how much is in Azure, and how much do you have left? Okay, it starts resuming after where it dropped. So no worries there. So let's head on back to the presentation. So in order to create a custom image, create a VHD file first. If you try to create a virtual machine in HyperV now, you have the VHDX standard by default. And Azure doesn't support VHDX, for God reason knows why. And it must be 127 gigabytes or smaller. It needs to be a Generation 1 virtual machine if you're using HyperV. You can use Send Server or VirtualBox, only in case it needs to support VHD. Must be MBR formatted. Can you use fixed size or expanding? So we just create a VHD, mount it, install Windows Server on it, install the applications, install the RDS session host role. You should also include desktop experience as well as .NET Framework, because you have a lot of application requirements using .NET Framework. Because basically, if you don't include it and you upload the applications and you upload the image, which is 60 gigabytes, and you can't start the application, oh, you have to do it again. Because you don't have admin privileges inside the virtual machine running in Azure. And then you disable encrypted file system, you do a sysprep, and you do the uploading script from PowerShell. And then Microsoft will add their own RDS admin account, and you will be stuck there with user privileges if you're using a regular cloud-based deployment. In a hybrid, you have, of course, admin privileges. And important to note that you need to have the patch 29.77219 installed, because if you don't, the upload is going to fail. But it's a couple of 3 or 4 months old now, so it's everybody has it installed for the most part. So, little list of best practices which I've gained so far. There aren't so many that have started using this yet. Always store data on a profile disk or OneDrive or Dropbox or whatever you want to use, but never store data locally. Create a copy of your image before doing sysprep. Makes it a lot easier if you need to upload or create new versions of applications. Disable automatic updates of applications. One thing you don't want to have is that users start on a remote app session and you have Java starting to pop up. Hey, you need to upgrade. And you can't do anything about it because you don't have admin privileges. And as I mentioned, profile disks are per app deployment. There's no way to delete them, even though if you remote the user privilege, the disks are still there. The only way to remove them is by deleting the deployment. You can verify latency by using a third-party website, which measures the latency between your own computer and the closest data centers to Azure. Use the latest and greatest RDP client. Microsoft has done a tremendous job in compressing the protocol data usage from version 7 to version 8. So important to use that. Yeah, use the management log to see if something happened. If suddenly something happens, you don't know why, it's probably Microsoft doing something. Yeah, and make sure you choose the correct VPN details, because creating a site-to-site VPN in RemoteApp is not the same as creating a regular site-to-site VPN in Azure. So you don't have any error messages or any descriptive logs about stuff happening in RemoteApp VPN. It just stands there that not connected. Okay, what's wrong? Where do I start? And make sure that the local VPN gateway is configured properly as well, with the traditional static routes you need to add in order to access the RemoteApp session. So, coming to the end, RemoteApp has 99.9 SLA, meaning that it will be available as downtime is about 37 hours or so. If Microsoft breaks that SLA, you will be refunded by credits, gift cards of sorts. Now, Basic has a cap of 400 users, and Standard has a cap of 250 users. And you can have up to 2 app deployments per subscription. So meaning on my MasterCard now, I have 2 app deployments. And the price also includes compute licensing, bandwidth, storage. So you don't have to worry about that. You just have to worry about the user per month. And you will always have a minimum of 2 RDS servers running at all time. Now, that's great. You have a per user per month subscription. That sounds cheap, right? It does. But here's the little quick note I just got notice of. You will always be billed for 20 users, even though you're just 2. So even though if I have small customers who are 2 to 3 employees, I think, hey, maybe I can use that to move my applications out to the cloud instead of having the local server which is running under my desk. That's great. So from a regular, let's say a basic deployment, starting price for 1 user is 61 kroners. But you will be always billed for 20 users. So meaning for 1 user a month, it will cost 1,200 kroners. And in that starting price, you have 40 hours of usage. So when you log off the session, you won't be billed for that. If you go over the 40 hours included in each month, you will have additional kroners, but you will have a cap price, so you won't be over 106 kroners per user, which sums up to 2,100 kroners a month. So when you go down to the pricing page in RemoteApp, you just scroll down to the last little detail on the side. There it says, all users will always be billed for 20 users. Great. So, to summarize, Azure RemoteApp, version 1.1 star. I wouldn't say it's a fully released yet, of RemoteApp as a service. A lot of new enhancements already announced. So, I see a lot of growth going to happen in this space. Easy way to get started moving the line of business applications to Azure. So far so good. There's a couple of things that I don't like about it. I can't change it, but I want to have the ability to integrate with existing virtual machines running in Azure, because a lot of customers are already starting to use it, and it makes sense. And of course, the flexibility to use different virtual networks inside RemoteApp. And even though Microsoft states that all users always want to just access the application, not the desktop, no, I don't find that's true. I think everyone wants to start a session and have the full screen, full desktop experience, and we have all the applications here. So that was my session. Hope you enjoyed it, and please remember to leave your feedback on the way out. Thank you.